I'm angry at my job. I'm mad at the government. I'm ticked off with my parents. I'm frustrated with my spouse. Today we're talking about resentment on Made for Glory. Resentment is anger that builds up over time, and oftentimes it's underneath the surface and can grow without us even being aware of it. We can often recognize that we're experiencing resentment towards someone through passive-aggressive movements in our own actions, our words, when we talk about someone behind their back, our frustration with them, us getting very, very angry at kind of small infractions, normal everyday infractions that someone might commit. And I think it's important for us to ask, where is this resentment coming from and how can we work against it so that it doesn't control us? Because when we're in the grips of resentment, we're not free. And God wants you to be free, that the glory of God is manifest in your life when you are fully alive. And resentment keeps us from living the fullness of life. So a couple ways that we can think about resentment and seek to counteract it by our faith. One is, first of all, recognizing that there's something in your own heart that needs to change. I know this is really challenging for people because many times we think I'm resentful of this person or this institution or the government. Right now, this time of coronavirus and quarantine and everything, we can just resent the world in general or the virus itself, and it builds up in kind of this unspoken frustration that bleeds out into every other part of our lives. But to be able to name it and to say, all right, I'm in this circumstance, I'm in this situation, I have this boss or I have this spouse or this person in my life or this neighbor, and I'm feeling anger towards them, frustration, I'm saying sharp words, maybe even behind their back, things about them, or I'm thinking it in my mind. And so recognizing that there's something in my heart that needs to change. So what's one thing that I can do today to change so that this reality isn't having control over me? This resentment isn't controlling my mind, my thoughts, and my actions. Because a lot of times we believe the lie that someone else is making me angry, or this situation is making me angry, or this person's causing my resentment. But oftentimes they're doing what they do, and it's our own hearts that need to change. Now, this isn't to excuse unjust behavior or people's, the fact that people are sinners and broken and can make lots of mistakes, but we can't control them. You can't control anybody else. That we need to look with God, with grace, look in our own hearts and say, what's one thing that I can change in my own life? And what that brings up the second thing, that if this resentment is towards a person that's in your life, that you might need to do one of the most difficult things in the world is to actually talk to them about it. And when I say talk to them about it, I don't mean to just tell them that they're terrible, they're awful, they always do this. That kind of language doesn't really breed conversation. It just breeds arguments, or maybe as if it's your boss, it's you trying to say that you quit. But to actually say, like, this is something that's happened, and it's happened a couple different times, and this is the way it's impacted me. This is where my heart has gone during when you said that, or when this was done to me, or this happened. Again, not to attack, but to say, can we work on a better way of dealing with this? Because what oftentimes happens is someone does something, and we assume that they know how that makes us feel. And so they do this action, it might be innocuous to them, but then we assume that they know how much that annoys us, we know how much that makes us feel disrespected, and so we craft a whole narrative about them and what's going on in their head, and because of that, it leads to greater and more resentment. This can happen with a spouse, this can happen with a roommate, this can happen with a boss or a coworker, and it happens all the time. And that narrative is so dangerous, because I often tell people, like, I don't always know why I do the things that I do. So how can I ever expect to know why somebody else does what they do? But when someone does something, we automatically assume that we know their motivations, we know why they did it. But until we have that kind of conversation, and it's painful, it's difficult, and involves you looking at your own self and what needs to change in you, then once we do that, we have a standard that we can judge our actions by. And they can actually be made aware of that problem. Now, it's possible that there's still friction, there's still problems, we're still fallen human beings, but at least there's a standard that we can work with. And so the third thing that we can do, if there's someone that's bringing up resentment in you, or a situation or a job or something, to bring that to a place of prayer, inviting God into that. God, help heal me here, because this is not just about this activity or this person or this situation. It's about what's going on in my heart. So asking the Lord into that. So those three things are maybe three ways that we can face resentment and maybe become a better human person as we look at that. Because God wants to set us free. God wants to lead us to glory, because God wants to lead us out of a place of resentment towards that place of peace. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Made for Glory. Thank you for all those who are supporting us on Patreon. We're so grateful to you. Also, as well, for all those who are leaving comments and questions below, that helps us to continue this conversation about what it means to be a Catholic in these very challenging times. God bless.